Something in the dark is pulling the blankets off the children. Something is slapping them awake. Something is whispering their names, and it has been doing this every single night for over a year. The year is 1818. The place is Robertson County, Tennessee, a frontier farm so remote that the nearest town is a half-day's ride away. And what is happening inside the Bell family's log home has no explanation that anyone, then or now, has fully agreed upon. Witnesses will multiply. A future president of the United States is later said to have visited the property and left shaken. A man will die under circumstances the legend never stopped arguing over. And the voice at the center of it all will be remembered as quoting scripture, singing hymns, and threatening murder. This is the Bell Witch case, one of the most argued over haunting legends in American history. We are going through the dates, places, witnesses, later accounts, and theories so the myth and the record stay separated. Chapter 1: The Farm at Red River. John Bell was not a man you would expect to be at the center of a ghost story. He was a prosperous, respected Baptist deacon, one of the most established landowners in Robertson County, Tennessee. By 1817, Bell owned over 300 acres along the Red River. He had a large family, a thriving farm, and a reputation for fairness in the community. He was, by every account, exactly the kind of man nothing strange was supposed to happen to. John Bell's wife, Lucy, was by all surviving accounts a woman of extraordinary composure, deeply religious, fiercely protective of her children, and the quiet anchor of the household. Their children ranged from young adults down to small children. It was a full, busy, apparently happy home. It began with sounds. In the summer of 1817, the Bell family started hearing knocking on the doors and walls of their cabin at night. Then scratching, like an animal clawing from inside the wood. Then something that sounded like chains being dragged across the floor. John Bell investigated every time. Every time, he found nothing. No animal. No intruder. No loose timber. The sound simply stopped when he searched, and resumed when he returned to bed. This went on for weeks. Then the disturbances escalated. The Bell children began waking up screaming, claiming something was pulling their hair, slapping their faces, yanking the blankets from their bodies. The youngest children showed marks. Betsy Bell, the family's 12-year-old daughter, became the most frequent target. Betsy Bell would become the central human figure in this entire case. She was reportedly struck hard enough to leave welts on her cheeks. She would wake with her hair matted, her face red, crying and unable to explain what had touched her in the dark. For months, John Bell kept this secret within the family. He was a deacon. He had a reputation. Whatever this was, animal, intruder, illness, something else, he was not ready to say out loud that something supernatural was happening in his home. Chapter 2: The First Witnesses. By 1818, John Bell could no longer keep the secret. The disturbances had become too violent, too frequent, and too strange for the family to manage alone. He confided in his closest neighbor, a man named James Johnston. James Johnston and his wife agreed to spend the night at the Bell farm to observe the phenomena themselves. What they reportedly experienced, and later testified to, changed everything about how this case was treated by the wider community. According to Johnston's own account, he and his wife heard the same knocking and scratching the Bells had described. Then their bedclothes were ripped off the bed by an invisible force. Johnston reportedly leapt up, quoted scripture aloud, and the disturbance immediately ceased for that night. Johnston's testimony was crucial because he was not a credulous man. He was educated, respected, and had nothing to gain from endorsing a ghost story. His account, combined with the Bells' months of reported suffering, opened the floodgates. Word spread across Robertson County. Over the following months, dozens of visitors came to the Bell farm specifically to witness the phenomena. Many of them did, and many of them reported experiences they could not explain. The Bell farm became, in effect, the first documented paranormal investigation site in American history. And then, the entity found its voice. Initially the sounds had been physical, knocking, scratching, hair pulling. Then came faint whispering. Then humming. Then, reportedly, a full speaking voice, one that multiple independent witnesses claimed to hear simultaneously, in the same room, at the same time. Chapter 3: The Voice. The moment this case crosses from disturbing into genuinely strange is the moment the bell witch, as it was now being called, began to speak coherently. And what it said was not random. It had opinions. It had targets. It had a theology. The voice reportedly quoted scripture with precision, lengthy passages from the Bible, delivered accurately and without hesitation. It sang hymns. It could simultaneously appear to be speaking from multiple locations in a room. And it answered questions. Visitors who came to test the entity reported that it knew things, personal details about people it had never supposedly encountered, details about events happening at distances from the farm, names, and facts that those present claimed they had never shared aloud. The entity expressed a clear preference: it loved Lucy Bell. It would bring her gifts, fresh fruit, hazelnuts, reportedly dropped from nowhere onto her lap. It told visitors that Lucy was a good woman and should be well cared for. It expressed this, apparently, with genuine warmth. And it expressed a clear hatred for one person, John Bell, the father and patriarch. It called him by name. It threatened him. It struck him. Witnesses reported John Bell being slapped across the face by something invisible, staggering backward in the presence of multiple onlookers. When asked what it was, the voice gave different answers on different occasions. It said it was the spirit of someone buried in the woods nearby whose grave had been disturbed. It said it was a witch. It said it was the spirit of nothing at all. The answers were inconsistent, and that inconsistency itself became part of the mystery. Chapter 4: Kate Bats and the Origin Theories. The entity eventually acquired a name, or rather, a nickname. People began calling it Kate. The name almost certainly came from Kate Bats, a neighbor of the Bells with whom John Bell had been involved in a land dispute. The dispute between John Bell and Kate Bats involved the alleged overcharging of usurious interest on a land sale, a serious moral and legal matter in a devout Baptist community. Bats was said to have declared, before she died, that she would haunt John Bell and his family. She died before the disturbances began, though exactly when is a matter of disputed record. The theory that Kate Bats's spirit was responsible was popular in the community at the time and has persisted in folklore ever since. But historians point out that this narrative conveniently arrived after the haunting was already underway. It was a retroactive explanation, not a documented cause. Other origin theories have been proposed across nearly 2 centuries of analysis. These range from the supernatural to the neurological to the deeply human, and none of them has achieved consensus. The poltergeist hypothesis is one of the most discussed. In parapsychological literature, poltergeist activity is frequently associated with adolescent girls, and Betsy Bell was 12 years old when the disturbances began, the most frequent target and the one most often present during reported incidents. Some researchers have proposed that Betsy Bell was the unconscious source of the phenomena, either through genuine psychokinetic ability as understood in parapsychology, or through deliberate physical staging driven by extreme psychological distress. Betsy herself, in later life, never conclusively explained what had happened. A more disturbing modern theory, advanced by some historians and psychologists, is that the haunting was a cover story, consciously or unconsciously constructed by the family, to mask ongoing domestic abuse. The pattern of Betsy being struck at night, marked, and targeted while her father suffered the entity's wrath has been read through this lens with uncomfortable coherence. It is a theory that cannot be proven with the available evidence, but it cannot be dismissed either. And it changes the emotional texture of the entire case, depending on how seriously you take it. Chapter 5: Andrew Jackson and the Night That Defies Explanation. Of all the claimed witnesses to the Bell Witch, the most famous, and the most debated, is Andrew Jackson, who was already a celebrated military hero when he allegedly visited the Bell farm around 1819. According to accounts published decades later, primarily in Martin V. Ingram's 1886 book Authenticated History of the Bell Witch, Jackson traveled to Robertson County with a group of companions specifically to investigate the phenomena. He was reportedly a skeptic going in. The story goes that as Jackson's wagon approached the Bell property, it suddenly stopped moving, the wheels locked, the horses froze, and could not be moved for several minutes despite every physical effort. Jackson reportedly declared that this was the work of the witch and that he had never encountered anything like it. That night, one of Jackson's companions, who had boasted that he could expose and defeat any witch, was reportedly tormented so severely that he begged to leave. Jackson and his party departed the next morning, reportedly shaken. Jackson is said to have declared afterward, "I'd rather face the entire British Army than spend another night with the Bell Witch." Here is the critical caveat: there is no contemporary documentation of Jackson's visit. No diary entry, no letter, no newspaper report from the period confirms that he was there. The story appears in print for the first time nearly 70 years after it supposedly occurred, in Ingram's 1886 account. Ingram's book itself is a central problem in this case. It is the primary historical source for almost everything we know about the Bell Witch, and it was written 69 years after the disturbances began, assembled from family accounts, community memory, and documents of uncertain provenance. Martin Vere Ingram was a newspaper editor, not a historian. He was sympathetic to the supernatural interpretation of events, and his book reads as much as advocacy as documentation. Skeptics point to it as evidence that the entire legend was constructed retroactively. Believers point to it as the preservation of genuine oral history that would otherwise have been lost. Chapter 6: The Death of John Bell. Whatever the Bell Witch was, by 1820 it had been terrorizing the Bell family for 3 years. And now it made good on its central threat. John Bell's health was collapsing. John Bell began suffering from a facial twitching, a convulsive jerking of the jaw and cheek muscles that made it impossible for him to eat or speak normally on many days. The condition worsened steadily. He lost weight. He lost strength. Visitors who had known him for years were reportedly shocked by his deterioration. The entity reportedly increased its attacks on John Bell during this period, slapping him, striking him, pulling his shoes from his feet in front of witnesses. Family accounts describe him being thrown to the ground by invisible force, gasping and disoriented. On the morning of December 20, 1820, John Bell was found in a deep, unresponsive stupor, a sleep so profound his family could not wake him. Beside his bed was a small vial of dark liquid that no one recognized. The family's doctor reportedly smelled it, tested a drop on the family cat, and watched the cat convulse and die. John Bell died that same day, December 20, 1820. He was approximately 70 years old. The official cause of death recorded at the time was simply reported as a mysterious ailment. The vial was thrown into the fire by a family member before any formal analysis could occur. According to family accounts recorded later, the moment John Bell died, the entity's voice was heard in the house, laughing, singing, celebrating. And then, over the following weeks, the disturbances began to subside. As if whatever had come had gotten what it wanted. John Bell is often described in paranormal literature as the man a ghost supposedly killed. That claim needs heavy qualification. His cause of death was not medically resolved, the alleged substance was destroyed, and key details come through family and local accounts recorded later. What the tradition preserves is that John Bell died after years of reported disturbances around his household. What remains disputed is what caused those events, how much later retelling shaped them, and what really happened inside that farmhouse. Chapter 7: The Return. Lucy Bell continued to live on the farm after her husband's death. The disturbances did not vanish entirely, they faded, but they left a residue. And reportedly, the entity made a promise before it withdrew. According to accounts in Ingram's book, the voice told the Bell family it would return in 7 years. And in 1828, 7 years after the main disturbances had subsided, the family reportedly experienced a brief but intense recurrence of the phenomena. Knocking. Voices. Physical manifestations. Then silence again. The entity allegedly told John Bell Jr., who was present during the 1828 events, that it would return again in 107 years, in 1935. Whether anything occurred in Robertson County in 1935 that could be attributed to the Bell, which is not documented in reliable historical records. Betsy Bell, the daughter most targeted by the entity, eventually married and moved away from Robertson County. She lived until 1888, long enough to be interviewed by researchers of the era. She reportedly declined to speak extensively about what had happened, but she never denied it. Chapter 8: The Cave and the Land. The Bell Farm in Adams, Tennessee is still there. And the land itself has its own chapter in this story, specifically a cave on the property that has become as mythologized as the farmhouse itself. The Bell Witch Cave, as it is now called, sits on a limestone bluff along the Red River. According to local tradition, the cave was a site of unusual activity during the haunting period. Sounds, voices, and disturbances were reported from within it by workers and family members. The cave is now a tourist site, drawing thousands of visitors each year. It has been the subject of numerous paranormal investigations using modern equipment, electromagnetic field detectors, infrared cameras, audio recorders. The results have been, depending on who you ask, either intriguing or inconclusive. The town of Adams, Tennessee, formerly known as Red River, has embraced the Bell Witch as its defining historical identity. There are festivals, tours, and a permanent cultural presence built around the case. The story has become inseparable from the landscape itself. Chapter 9: 2 Centuries of Argument. The Bell Witch case has never been resolved, and the argument about what it means has never stopped. In the late 19th century, Tennessee newspapers published investigations of the case. In the 20th century, researchers from both the paranormal and skeptical communities have analyzed every available piece of evidence. The case has inspired novels, films, including the 2005 movies An American Haunting, based on the Brent Monahan novel, documentaries, and academic papers. It has been cited in discussions of mass hysteria, parapsychology, domestic violence studies, and frontier American social history. What makes the Bell Witch case genuinely difficult to dismiss is the volume of reported witnesses. This was not one family's isolated claim. Dozens of documented community members reportedly experienced the phenomena firsthand. Ministers, physicians, and civic leaders put their reputations behind their accounts. What makes it genuinely difficult to accept as supernatural is the complete evaporation of physical evidence, the destroyed vial, the absence of contemporary written records from witnesses, the 69-year gap between events and primary publication, and the impossibility of independent verification for any of the central claims. The honest answer is that we do not know what happened at the Bell Farm. We know the legend grew around a real family and a real Tennessee community. We know later accounts describe witnesses, fear, voices, and violence. We do not know how much was haunting, hoax, illness, family conflict, folklore, or memory. Chapter 10: What the Witch Said. Before we close this case file, there is one more element worth sitting with. Because the Bell Witch, whatever it was not silent. It communicated extensively. And some of what it communicated is, in retrospect, the strangest part of this entire story. The entity expressed a coherent moral framework. It punished what it saw as sin, specifically John Bell's alleged financial wrongdoing with Kate Batts. It protected what it saw as virtue, specifically Lucy Bell's piety and goodness. It quoted scripture accurately. It seemed, in its own way, to be acting out a kind of frontier Baptist justice. Whether that means it was a genuine spirit with theological convictions, a human hoaxer with intimate knowledge of the community's moral landscape, a manifestation of collective psychological projection, or something else entirely, that question is still open. What is extraordinary is that this case, this family's years of documented suffering, this community's upheaval, this man's strange death, has remained alive in American consciousness for over 2 centuries. Most ghost stories fade. This one didn't. Maybe it persists because it resists resolution. Maybe it persists because the suffering of the Bell family was real, whatever caused it. Maybe it persists because somewhere in the story, in the voice that loved a mother and hated a father, in the girl who bore the marks on her skin, in the man who died of something no one could name, there is a human truth that we recognize even when we cannot name it. The Bell Farm still stands on the Red River. The cave is still there. The graves of the Bell family are still there, including John Bell's, in a small cemetery on the original property. People still visit them. People still report strange things when they do. The Bell Witch case is not solved. It may never be solved. But it is, without question, the most thoroughly reported, most widely witnessed, and most stubbornly persistent haunting in American history, a case that began in 1817 and has not yet fully ended. And now it's your turn. What do you think happened to the Bell family? Was it a genuine paranormal entity? A hoax? A family tragedy dressed in supernatural language? A cover for something darker? Tell us in the comments. This case deserves the argument it always generates. And if you want more strange histories, documented mysteries, and cases that refuse clean answers, subscribe. We put a new one out every week.